For more on this, let's bring in Michael Geist to the conversation. He is a well-known law professor at the University of Ottawa, where he holds the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law. Michael, good to have you with us. What do you make of this?
Well, I think the U.S. is moving in one direction. In Canada, we're moving in the opposite one. We've seen Canadian officials double down and clearly support net neutrality. And the U.S. approach, I think, is really unfortunate. I don't think that the press secretary can really have her cake and eat it too. You can't, on the one hand, talk about fair rules and at the same time support two-tier internets where ISPs start determining the speeds with which certain sites get delivered to their customers.
We keep hearing this term, throttling certain websites. And is that what we're talking about, Michael? That, in fact, certain companies that have more money and more clout would allow their sites to download faster. People could use the sites with quicker speed, whereas others would be sort of shunted to a second tier of speed?
Right, that's certainly part of the concerns with respect to net neutrality. So part of it has to do with this possibility that they would create a two-tier internet, as you suggest, a fast lane for those that are willing to pay and a slow lane for everyone else. And of course, the fast lane will largely be the deep-pocketed companies, or perhaps some of the companies that the ISPs themselves, the telecommunications companies themselves, have a vested interest in, and everybody else consigned to the slow lane, creating real struggle for those that want to innovate and emerge to become the next generation of big players. It doesn't just stop there, though. There's the concerns around potentially even blocking access to content, another practice known as zero rating, where certain content becomes data-free. Doesn't count against your data cap, but the incentive there, once again, for ISPs to prefer or to zero rate their own content, creating a real competitive disadvantage for everyone else.
I want to ask you as well about the impact on us here in Canada. I mean, the FCC governs the United States. We are not governed by them, obviously. But what is it going to mean in practice, potentially, Michael?
Right, and I think a lot of people are asking, well, what's the impact here in Canada? And as I mentioned, the starting point is we have net neutrality rules, and it's quite clear that both the government as well as our version of the FCC, the CRTC, supports continuing those rules. But the impact might be most acutely felt for Canadian businesses, because those businesses, as they move into the United States or try to attract U.S. customers or subscribers, are going to face some of those same kinds of challenges. Think of large e-commerce companies in Canada like Shopify that have thousands and thousands of online stores. They've got other competitors in that same space. What happens if they find themselves and all their stores stuck on a slow lane, everybody else on a fast lane? So many of those Canadian businesses may face some real competition challenges as they move into the United States and find themselves pretty vulnerable to the loss of net neutrality.
Many people would not be surprised to see that this decision was made by the FCC. I mean, Donald Trump was elected, as you know, Michael, to sort of upend the apple cart, so to speak. But could it not be changed down the line? And if not, why would the U.S. government do this to begin with?
Well, it's very clear that this particular decision is going to be subject to challenges in a number of different places, where there's already word of legal challenges against this particular decision and a strong movement afoot in Congress to effectively overturn it by embedding strong net neutralities in the law. So I don't think the fight in the United States against net neutrality ends today. In some ways, it actually picks up a lot of steam today, as those that are really concerned and angry over what the FCC has done are determined to find alternative mechanisms to restore policies that frankly predate the Obama administration. It isn't just about rules that were established a few years ago. These kinds of rules have been in place for far longer, and that the reversal of those rules represents a real setback in that regard.
Have we heard a lot from the big tech companies on this, Michael, or has it been kind of radio silence?
No, I think many have been speaking out. They haven't necessarily been in the front lines on all of these issues in the same way that the general public has, where we've seen in the United States millions of people speak out. But just in the last couple of hours, we've seen companies like Netflix and Google both speaking out against this decision, indicating that they are quite prepared to continue to fight for net neutrality and continue to work towards, in a sense, reversing what the FCC just did.
How does this play out over the next couple of years, do you think?
Well, that's for everybody the big question. And so the door is now open, or will be open, for the large internet providers to move forward to that with that non-neutral internet. I don't think it's necessarily the case we're going to see a two-tier internet tomorrow, but gradually over time, it's certainly possible that in the United States we will see internet providers begin to try to negotiate private deals, sometimes even public, I suppose, with some of the large players trying to extract additional revenue from them by creating some of these kinds of fast lanes, leaving everyone else behind. And then longer term, that's where I think you start feeling the real impact, where innovation that might have happened, and it's of course always difficult to identify where that might come from, but new innovators that might have come into the marketplace may really struggle to find a place in the marketplace, in part because they find them stuck on the slow lane.
Michael Geist is a law professor at the University of Ottawa, one of our country's foremost experts when it comes to the issue of the internet, the law, e-commerce as well. Michael, wonderful to have you with us on CTV, and thank you for making time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.